When you stop contacting a woman, especially one who's emotionally invested in you, the first thing that often happens is she turns inward. This isn't about weakness or insecurity. It's human nature. Silence has a way of echoing in the spaces where there used to be connection. And in that silence, questions begin to surface. She starts to ask herself, did I say too much? Was I too available? Did I do something to push him away? It's a quiet unraveling, not always visible on the outside, but deeply felt. This isn't just emotional, it's psychological. You see, we all have a need for closure, for narrative completion. When you abruptly pull back or disappear, it disrupts the story she thought she was living. Our minds are wired to make sense of disruptions. And so, she revisits past conversations, reanalyzes every text, every tone, every look. Not because she's obsessive, but because she's searching for meaning. It's an attempt to reestablish control in the face of emotional uncertainty. And here's the deeper philosophical truth. When communication ceases, it doesn't create clarity. It creates a void. And in that void, the mind projects. Sometimes she'll project her fears, other times her hopes, but rarely will the reality match the fantasy. That's why silence can be more powerful than confrontation. It forces the other person to face themselves in ways they didn't expect. And that self-confrontation, it's uncomfortable. It can either make someone retreat or evolve. Now, some women, especially those with high emotional intelligence, will catch themselves in this spiral. They'll pause and say, wait, this isn't about me. It's about him, his choices, his timing. But even then, that initial reflex of self-questioning has already occurred. Because the truth is, no one walks away from connection, real connection, without feeling it somewhere. And for women who love deeply or connect authentically, silence doesn't feel neutral. It feels like rejection, even if it's not intended that way. So when you stop reaching out, know this, it doesn't go unnoticed. It sparks a process inside her that's quiet but profound. She begins to look inward, and whether that leads to self-blame, awakening, or transformation depends entirely on where she is in her own journey. But one thing is certain, your silence will not be empty, it will speak. And what it says about you depends entirely on what she discovers in that silence. ChatGPT said, after that initial phase of questioning herself, something interesting begins to happen. Her curiosity intensifies. Now, this isn't random or superficial. It's actually rooted in something deeply psychological, the Zeigarnik effect. Human beings tend to remember and fixate on unfinished experiences more than completed ones. When communication ends abruptly, especially without explanation, the brain treats it like an incomplete puzzle. And what do we do with puzzles? We try to solve them. This is when she starts paying closer attention, perhaps even closer than when you were present. She might start scanning your online activity, noticing things she previously overlooked. That news story you posted, that tweet with a vague quote, the sudden change in your energy, these become data points. She's not necessarily obsessed. She's seeking understanding. Because again, silence doesn't bring clarity. It provokes curiosity. She wants to know why. She wants to understand what changed. And it's important to realize that this curiosity isn't always about getting you back. It's about restoring coherence. We crave emotional consistency. When someone shifts from daily conversations to complete silence, that disruption creates tension. It's in our nature to try to relieve that tension by seeking answers. Some women will scroll through old messages, not because they miss you in a nostalgic sense, but because they're looking for signs, clues, anything to make the picture make sense again. And let's go a little deeper. Philosophically speaking, we are meaning-making creatures. When a connection goes quiet, especially without warning, it challenges the meaning that person had assigned to you. She begins to wonder if she misjudged your character, your intentions, your truth, that dissonance between how things felt and how things ended. That's where the curiosity grows. Not because she's stuck, but because she's trying to reconcile emotional reality with emotional logic. So when you stop contacting her, you might think you're creating space, distance, or control. But what you're really creating is an unresolved narrative in her mind. And make no mistake, narratives matter, because how she interprets that silence, whether as indifference, a test, or closure, can shape her perception of not only you, but of herself. Silence may seem like a simple absence of words, but in her mind, it becomes a search for truth. And once she starts asking questions, she won't stop until she finds her own answers, whether they lead her back to you or away for good. At a certain point, after the questioning and curiosity have run their course, something inside her shifts. She begins to mirror your distance, not because she's given up and not because she doesn't care, but because she has no other choice. Human connection is a two-way street, and when one party pulls away, the other eventually adjusts to that new rhythm. It's a kind of emotional survival. Her silence becomes a response, not a retreat. Now let's be clear, this isn't always a conscious decision. Sometimes it's subtle, almost instinctive. She starts responding slower, the messages get shorter, the emotional openness she once gave so freely starts to close in. Not to punish you, but to protect herself. Because no matter how strong or secure a woman is, prolonged emotional imbalance can only be sustained for so long. Eventually, she mirrors what she's receiving. This is where the dynamic starts to shift dramatically. Up until now, the power might have felt like it was in your hands, but when she begins to match your energy, especially if she was once emotionally generous, you'll feel the difference. The warmth is no longer there. The accessibility begins to fade. She might still be physically present or still following you online, but her emotional availability. That door is slowly closing. What's fascinating here is the psychological mechanism at work. It's known as reciprocal behavior, a natural tendency to reflect the actions and energy of others. It's not manipulation, it's emotional equilibrium. When she feels ignored, undervalued, or dismissed, she mirrors that energy to restore her internal balance. And in doing so, she starts to reclaim her power, often without even realizing it. And here's where the philosophical depth sets in. What you're witnessing is a shift from response to self-regulation. She's no longer waiting for you to validate her experience. She's building her own emotional boundaries. That mirror she holds up to your silence, it's not for revenge, it's clarity. It's her way of saying, if I'm not being prioritized, then I'll prioritize myself. So if you stop contacting her thinking she'll chase or cling, be careful what you assume. Because once she starts mirroring your silence, it's no longer about you, it's about her peace. And when a woman chooses peace over confusion, the silence becomes permanent. Once the emotional distance settles in and the silence becomes the new norm, she begins to step back, not just physically, but mentally and emotionally, and in that space, something powerful begins to unfold: reevaluation. This is where the real transformation often begins. It's no longer about you, it's about the relationship. About what it was, what it meant, and what it revealed. When a woman starts to reevaluate, she's not just asking whether she misses you. She's asking deeper, more critical questions. Was this connection truly healthy? Was I seen? Was I heard? Or was I simply available? She's reviewing the emotional investment she made and measuring it against the returns, both tangible and intangible. And make no mistake, women are emotionally intuitive, but they can also be incredibly rational when they need to be. When feelings fade into silence, logic often takes the lead. Psychologically, this process is essential. It's a recalibration of self-worth. When someone withdraws, it forces the other to examine what they were truly holding on to. Sometimes the silence helps her see that what felt like love was actually just attention, that what seemed like emotional connection was really a pattern of convenience. And once that clarity sets in, she starts to redefine her standards. This phase can be uncomfortable, but it's also incredibly liberating. Because she's no longer reacting to your absence, she's actively deciding what that absence means to her. And the deeper the reflection, the more likely she is to grow through it. This is where emotional maturity reveals itself. Some women will recognize that they were chasing potential, not reality. Others will realize they've been undervaluing themselves in the name of love. Either way, the lens changes, and here's the deeper truth: distance doesn't always create longing. Sometimes it creates perspective. And that perspective can be sobering. What once felt magnetic might now feel misaligned. What once seemed worth fighting for may now feel like a chapter better left closed. So, if you think your silence puts her on pause, think again. More often than not, it puts her on a path to self-awareness, to healing, and ultimately to decisions that don't involve you. Because the moment she begins to reevaluate, she's no longer waiting, she's choosing. After the reevaluation phase, her next move becomes more intentional. And here's where things begin to crystallize. She will either try to reconnect, or she will detach completely. But don't be fooled into thinking this is random or impulsive. Her response at this stage is the result of an emotional journey she's already been on. One filled with introspection, silence, and self-awareness. Some women will reach out, but not in the way you might expect. It won't be dramatic or desperate. It might be a casual check-in, a meme shared to spark familiarity, or a subtle "I saw this and thought of you." That outreach isn't weakness, it's curiosity with a sprinkle of vulnerability. It's a small door left open to see if there's still life on the other side. If she feels there's emotional safety and maturity, she might be open to reconnection. But only if your energy has shifted too, because by now she's not reaching out to chase closure, she's reaching out to see if anything's changed. But for many women, especially those who have learned to value their peace over chaos, the silence becomes confirmation. And in that confirmation, she detaches quietly, completely. You may not even notice it at first. She won't block you. She won't lash out. She'll simply stop investing. Her emotions, her energy, her thoughts, they are no longer orbiting around your absence. They've returned home to her. This kind of detachment is powerful. Psychologically, it's a sign that she's moved from reaction to resolution. She's accepted that not every story gets closure, not every connection gets continued. She's chosen emotional autonomy over emotional confusion. And the most important part, she's no longer waiting, she's living. What's important to understand is that this isn't about punishment or pride. It's about preservation. It's about recognizing that sometimes letting go is the most loving thing she can do for herself. Because a woman who detaches in silence isn't cold, she's clear, and once a woman becomes clear, her decisions are final. So if you ever find yourself wondering why she never came back, or why she suddenly seems unreachable, it's not because she didn't care. It's because in the space your silence created, she found her own peace. And peace, once claimed, rarely looks back. ChatGPT said, and finally, after all the internal processing, emotional mirroring, and quiet detachment, she will make a decision. Not a loud, impulsive one, but a calm, grounded choice. And that decision, it changes everything. You see, silence doesn't last forever. It demands resolution, whether through reconnection or complete release. A woman will eventually decide what your absence means for her future. And here's what makes this moment so defining. By the time she reaches this point, she's no longer led by emotion. She's led by clarity. This decision isn't about payback or power. It's about peace. She's weighed the value of the connection, the emotional labor invested, and the impact of your silence. She's likely asked herself the hard questions. Is this something I can trust again? Was it love, or was I just holding on to potential? And more importantly, do I even want this anymore? That last question. That's the turning point. Psychologically, it's a reclaiming of control. She's no longer waiting for you to speak, to explain, to return. She's now the one who holds the narrative. And philosophically, it's the moment where she rewrites the story, not as someone abandoned, but as someone who chose herself. Because sometimes what looks like someone moving on is really someone moving inward, deeper into their own sense of worth and direction. And here's the thing, if she chooses to walk away, she won't do it loudly. She won't announce it or seek applause. She'll simply disengage, emotionally, mentally, spiritually, and once that door closes, it doesn't reopen the same way again, because now her decision is rooted in experience, not emotion. On the other hand, if she does decide to reconnect, it won't be out of need. It will be from a place of strength, with new boundaries, new standards, and a sharper awareness of what she's willing to tolerate. Either way, the dynamic has changed, and so has she. So when a woman stops hearing from you, don't assume time stands still. Time reveals. It reveals character, reveals priorities, reveals who's meant to remain and who was simply passing through. Because in the end, a woman always decides, and once she does, that decision becomes a mirror, not just of her growth, but of the space you left behind. Choose your silence wisely.